California's cannabis market, there's one number that just dominates. THC percentage.
Oh yeah, the whole 30% or bust thing is huge.
But what if those numbers, the ones you're basing your choice on, aren't actually, well, accurate?
That's the core issue, isn't it?
So today we're doing a deep dive, looking at California cannabis testing fraud, using some really interesting stuff from Nug Notes.
Right.
And our goal is to unpack how this mandatory testing system, the one set up for safety back in 2018, somehow ended up with these huge loopholes.
It's pretty wild how quickly it happened. I mean, the intention was good. California goes legal in 2018, requires testing for THC, pesticides, metals, all that.
Which sounds great on paper, necessary even.
Totally necessary. But here's the catch, right from the start. There was no single statewide standard for how labs actually did the testing.
So like zero standardization.
Exactly. Every lab was kind of making up its own process.
Okay, I can already see the problem forming if everyone's using a different ruler.
Precisely. And brands figured this out fast. Retailers started pushing high THC stuff, sorting menus by potency.
Because 30% plus sells better, sells faster.
You got it. So if you're a brand and one lab gives you 25%, but another might give you 31% using their method, what do?
You send samples everywhere and pick the highest number? Lab shopping.
That's exactly what happened. It became this open secret almost, driven entirely by that consumer demand for the big three hero.
So this 30% trap, as you called it, wasn't just in the consumer's head. It shaped the whole market.
It really did. It drove prices, sales velocity, everything. And, certain labs got reputations, not always for being the most accurate, maybe.
But for hitting those high numbers?
Yeah. It created this, let's say, misaligned incentive.
And we know this isn't just chatter, right? There's data backing this up.
Oh, absolutely. Independent retests later on showed some pretty shocking results. I mean, one analysis found something like 64% of supposedly top-shelf flower failed potency or pesticide tests when checked by another lab.
Wow, 64%. That's huge.
It is. And you even had brands getting sued over results that were clearly inflated.
So what about enforcement? Were labs facing consequences for, fudging the numbers?
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
The notes mentioned specific labs, CCTL, Verity, Bel Costa, getting caught between 2023 and 2025 for inflating results or faking data.
Okay, so action was taken.
Eventually, licenses got pulled, yeah. But often after potentially bad products had been sold for months, sometimes longer, it felt a bit reactive, not proactive.
Like closing the barn door after the horse is bolted.
Something like that.
So here we are in 2024. You'd think things must be standardized by now.
Well, progress, maybe.
Yeah.
California did finally roll out a single standard testing method this year.
Okay, got
And but according to the source, it's only for flower.
Just flower. What about vapes, edibles, concentrates?
Still largely without those required unified protocols. So there's still room for, let's call it interpretation, if labs aren't watched closely.
So it comes back to those incentives again. Why is it still happening?
Because the system fundamentally still rewards those high numbers. Higher THC often means a higher wholesale price.
And the risk for labs playing games hasn't been high enough.
Seems that way. Historically, enforcement wasn't robust enough, and there wasn't a state-referenced lab program to double-check things systematically. Low risk, potentially high reward.
So if you're shopping today, what's the actual situation on the ground?
Well, you are seeing some buyers get savvier. They're starting to look beyond just THC.
Asking about terpenes, minor cannabinoids, effects.
Exactly. Focusing more on the overall experience. But let's be real.
The majority still just wants that big number.
Yeah. That 30% or bust mentality is still incredibly powerful at the counter. That single number often seals the deal.
So the core truth here, based on the Nug Notes material,
is that California required lab testing, which was vital, but it never really got a handle on regulating the truthfulness of those tests.
Right. The system was set up, but the guardrails weren't strong enough.
Exactly. Standardization and enforcement lagged behind.
Which meant this system ended up rewarding manipulation, not guaranteeing accuracy for you, the person buying the product.
Yeah, it inadvertently incentivized the wrong things.
So the big takeaway, testing is mandatory, but without the right standards and tough oversight, the numbers themselves became unreliable.
Which leads to a pretty interesting final thought for you listening.
Okay.
If the numbers designed to tell you about a product's basic potency can be skewed this easily by market pressure and lack of oversight, what does that suggest about relying too heavily on any single data point you see?
Whether it's on a cannabis label or Really, any label on any market.
Exactly. How much trust should you place in just one number when the system around it might be flawed? Something to chew on.